Ms. Parks on the kids count and specifically for Cumberland. So we hope that we have a very active discussion about the data and how that relates to here in Cumberland. I just want to say that I'm always glad to be at McCourt Middle School. I think I was one of the first students here way back in 1972. I don't know, does anybody know when the school is actually? I think it's somewhere around that. Anyway, so it's good to be here. So without further ado, I'm going to try this last night. Last night I introduced Alicia, and I got it wrong. I got the first name wrong. I got the second. I got the last name good. So Alicia DeStefani. All right. Please welcome Alicia DeStefani.
Good afternoon. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alicia DeStefani, the Director of Special Services here in Cumberland. I'm here tonight on behalf of Dr. Thornton and the rest of the Central Leadership Team. Unfortunately, Dr. Thornton could not be here due to a death in his family. Our thoughts are with him and his family during this difficult time. We are thrilled to welcome Rhode Island Kids Count for today's presentation of data in your backyard. It's exciting for Cumberland to have such valuable information and insights shared right here in our very own backyard. This data provides valuable insights into the health, education, and overall well-being of our children. It's a powerful tool that helps to make informed decisions for all of Cumberland's youth. We are looking forward to learning more about the data and how it can help us better serve our community. So thank you for being here today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rosemary Riley Shamat, and I'm with the Cumberland Education Foundation. And I also want to recognize Eileen LaChance, who is also here and on the board with me. We are so thrilled to join the mayor's office and the town, as well as the Cumberland School Department, to welcome Rhode Island Kids Count to Cumberland and participate in this presentation on data in our backyard. Data literally drives everything, and I couldn't agree more with what Alyssa said about the importance of data and the importance of this opportunity, so I will not repeat that. I would like to tell you a little bit about the Cumberland Education Foundation. We're a nonprofit organization that was created to strengthen and bridge the community in our public schools. Our goals are to serve as a catalyst for the development and promotion of innovative programs, such as this, supporting students seeking to further their education following graduation, and increasing community awareness and support of our schools. And I think that this type of event is an important way to do that. To date, we have awarded over $44,000 in grants to our schools since 2018. We have awarded almost $15,000 in scholarships to students, and we also partner with award-winning author David Macaulay, who is actually a Cumberland High School graduate, and he works with the Arts Honors Program at McCourt Middle School as an honorary board member of the foundation. So if you're interested in being a part of the foundation or finding out more, we do have information at the table, or you could talk to Eileen or me. We would love to have your involvement in that. And so without further ado, so that we can get to the data and we can get to why we're here, I'm really honored to welcome Paige Closius Parks, who is the Executive Director of Rhode Island Kids Count, to lead us in the data and the discussion. Paige, welcome. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Oh, okay. So I'm not going to talk at you all night. We're going to have a discussion. So we'll start over again. Hi, everyone. Hey, nice to see everyone. Thank you for having us here today. Thank you, Mayor Mutter, for inviting us in. Thank you to the superintendent and the school department and to the Cumberland Education Foundation. It's so great to be here, not only in your backyard, but also in my backyard. So I was a resident of Cumberland for 8 years. My children have grown up in Cumberland Public Schools. They're currently students at North Cumberland Middle School. They went to Ashton, and they are still in Cumberland, and I moved just down the road, just down Mendon Road. I'm now just down the street in Lincoln, but still a Cumberland parent. You'll see me on the soccer fields at Diamond Hill Saturday mornings, there again on Sunday for flag football. I'm sure I have seen some of you on the field or on the court, Boys and Girls Club at some point. So nice to be here and to bring this presentation to you. This is a presentation that we do across different communities, and it looks different everywhere that we go. So in Newport, I think it's our longest running one there. We've been there, I think, almost a decade. And it's during the morning, it's during the day, and it has a lot of different agencies that are there that are representing. Woonsocket, we've been there before. It's part of their full day, like citywide retreat and looking at different programs in the city. Bristol Warren will be there next week. That has a different feel and vibe. And so happy this is our first one in Cumberland. And I have to say, I think Cumberland is winning the award for the most parents who are attending this presentation. So it's different composition everywhere we go. And so happy that this one feels like home, feels like family. And I'd love to know who each of you are before we get further. And it's a time for you all to get to know who's in the room too. So if we can just go around just quickly, if you can say your name, and are you a parent, are you a teacher, community organization, what's your relationship here in Cumberland? So you can start. I'll add an excellent, extraordinary director of special education services. It's been great working with you. Welcome. You go, Mom. Welcome, Mom. You can go here. Mayor? Thank you. Awesome. Congratulations. We'll go in the back table. Awesome. before we get too far, I want to make sure we get Mom in the back corner. Do you want to introduce yourself? I know your hands are full. Awesome. Thanks. Thanks for being here. Awesome. I'm glad you're here. Thanks. Okay, we'll go back table. This table. Thanks for hosting us. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Hi, Amy. Yeah, excellent. Nice to see you. And we partner on lots of things as well. So nice to see you. So, as you guys know, I'm Paige Park, Executive Director, and our wonderful staff is here. So Jennifer Capaldo is our project and technology coordinator who helped to make sure we were up and ready to go for today. And Katie Linwood, who's our communications manager. She'll be tweeting throughout this event. And then our next executive director there, Viv, she's chomping at the bits to take my job all the time. And so she's here to help out today too. Okay, so again, thank you to the Cumberland Education Foundation, to the City of Cumberland, and to the Cumberland School District. So to tell you a little bit more about who we are. So Rhode Island Kids Count is a nonprofit organization. We are a children's policy and advocacy organization working to improve the health, safety, economic well-being, education, and development of Rhode Island's children. And we have a core focus on equity and eliminating unacceptable disparities based on race, ethnicity, income, immigration status, neighborhood, and zip code. And we do, that's a big mission, right? And we do that through a lot of different ways. We are 30 years young, so we've been doing this work for a long time. And how we operate, we do a couple of things. Is one, we are known to provide information on children's well-being. We are a big data hub. So most people know us from the Rhode Island Kids Count Fact Book. It is an annual publication that is the state's most comprehensive data set on Rhode Island's children. It tracks 70 indicators of child well-being using data from across state agencies. And that is the data that I'm going to share with you today, some highlights of that publication. Sure, yeah. Yeah, we have a few hard copies if anyone wants to take a look at it. You can download it for free on our website, so rikidscount.org. You can download the whole thing. We want you to use it. That's why it's there for free. Please use it to understand your community and the Rhode Island community. If you develop programs, you can use that to figure out where's the greatest need. Please use it for fundraising. It's helpful for that. And we also love when students use it for their reports, for looking at how do you show math and visualizations and charts. Please use that tool any way that you see fit. So that is there for you to use. We then take that data and we stimulate dialogue about children's issues. So we bring together community members and policymakers together to look at the data. and talk about it. What are the causes for some of the outcomes we're seeing? And what are solutions that we can bring together at the community level and at the statewide level with policy? So we're a big convener. We like to bring everybody to the party and talk about kids. We also promote accountability and action. Our staff is often at many, many meetings of the state, but our state agencies, really being a partner and also having accountability for how we are providing good well-being for our kids. So we track legislation. We also do advocacy at the State House for different investments for kids and for legislation that we know will impact some of the data that we see year after year in the fact book. So we're 30 years young. We have 11 staff members. We do a lot with 11 people. I encourage you to look at our website. You can sign up for our email list so you can be updated for when we have publications that come out. So I mentioned the fact book. That's like our big book every year. But throughout the year, we also release different publications, which will be mentioned throughout the presentation today, that touch on very specific issues that we just don't have enough room in the fact book to talk about. So if you sign up for our email list, we will let you know when new publications come out. We will let you know when there are events. And if you're interested in joining us in advocacy efforts, you'll also get invitations and information about how you can be involved. Okay. So today's data is coming from the 2024 fact book. As I mentioned, there's 70 indicators that spread over 5 areas. And that fact book talks about 70 indicators of child well-being, and we also take the data and we disaggregate that data in any way that we possibly can. So we disaggregate it by city and town. So when we know and we have available and reliable data by city and town, we share it that way. We also disaggregate by race, ethnicity, gender, language status. If we have immigration status data, we will provide that as well so that we can take a look at how are these issues impacting all different populations of children. Okay, so if you look at the data just as a whole, it could tell one story, but when you break it down, you actually can see, maybe things are not what they seem. So that's why we disaggregate that data. So, sharing the highlights, we're going to jump into it. In this presentation, I don't want to talk the whole time. It will get boring that way. I was a former teacher as well, so I don't want to lecture at you all. I want there to be conversation, please. So, if I say something and you're like, what does that mean? Stop me. If you have a question, stop me, ask a question. If you have work that you're doing that relate to some of the data, stop us, tell us about it. That's one of the great things about the data in your backyard presentations is that sometimes people are like, I didn't know that you do that. My organization does that too, and you can find some collaborative work together. So let's share together. Sound good? This is going to be the quietest you're going to be, right? Okay, good. All right, so first we'll look at family and community. Who are our kids? So we're looking at first the child population by race and ethnicity in Cumberland. So this is based on the U.S. Census data. So in the 2010 census, there were just over 7,500 children in Cumberland. And you'll see 84% of those children during that reporting year identified as white. When we look at the most recent census, 2020, we see that Cumberland's becoming a more diverse population, where there's just over 7,500 children again. The number of children hasn't changed too much, but the ethnicity and race of children have. So 71% of kids now in Cumberland identify as white, 12% as Hispanic or Latino, 3% Black, less than 1% Native American. We've seen a growth in the Asian population to 6%, and then 8% identifying as other. Okay, so this is important to know that Rhode Island is becoming a really diverse state, and so is Cumberland. Okay, if you're looking at the whole statewide data, young people are more likely to identify as people of color than any other age group in our state. Okay, so this is a great thing. The diversity we have is a wonderful thing, but you're going to see some disparities that we'll talk about in this presentation. And it's important to remember and think about the disparities of what we have to pay attention to, because as our children become, and our cities and towns and our state becomes more diverse, if we don't get it right for our marginalized kids who will become the majority soon, then we're really doing a disservice to our state. So we need to pay attention to these populations and put in concerted efforts to making sure we're providing equity so that kids who are struggling can get what they need to succeed. And folks who are in special education also know what's good for special ed tends to be good for general ed kids too. Same for also if we're looking at different populations. If we can figure out how to help the kids that are struggling the most, all kids actually benefit from a lot of those techniques, investments, and priorities. Any questions here? Okay. So economic well-being. You'll hear me talk about child poverty a lot and the poverty rates. Does anyone know what the federal poverty level is? What the dollar amount? Too low. Say it again. It is too low. Anyone want to take a guess at how much? It's okay. Just take a guess. It's okay to not be right. It's okay. 64,000 was one guess. I'm sorry, it's that? Family of 4, 64,000 is one guess. Thank you. Anyone else? What's that? 25,000. Hi, Jocelyn. Good to see you. Jocelyn, you want to introduce yourself? I just put you on blast, and then I... Yes. So we work a lot together, and she's a Cumberland resident. So, thanks, Jocelyn. So yes, the poverty level in 2023 for a family of 3 is just over $24,500. And for a family of 4, just under $31,000 a year. Can you imagine living on that? Not at all. So it's very low. It's a very outdated measure, actually, very outdated. It's based on from the 1960s, the cost of bread. It's like this ridiculous calculation that really doesn't apply anymore, but it's still what's used by the federal government. So when we talk about children living in poverty, just keep these dollar amounts in mind, and also know if you're a family of 3 making $30,000 an hour, are you still struggling? Yeah. Those kids aren't counted when we're talking about children living in poverty. Okay, so there is a lot of families that aren't considered living in poverty, but we know are struggling immensely. Okay, so the numbers you'll see, just imagine it's actually quite more for kids. The number that we like to look at is called the 2024 Rhode Island Standard of Need. It's a calculation that is done every 2 years by an organization called the Economic Progress Institute. And what they do is they look and they say, okay, the federal poverty level really isn't sufficient. Let's look at what it actually costs to live in Rhode Island, right? So the federal poverty level is the same level throughout the country. But we know there are some areas where it's way more expensive, like where we live, than in other parts of the country. So they say, in Rhode Island, what does it cost to live without needing any subsidies? So without any government supports. So looking at that, a single parent with 2 children in Rhode Island would need to earn $83,239 a year just to make its basic needs. So pre-tax, that's almost $100,000 a year. Okay? So you need to make almost $100,000 a year in Rhode Island if you're a single parent with 2 children. And that's just basic needs. That's no vacations. That's not, this is just you have a roof over your head, you have food in your belly, you have reliable child care. No thrills, $100,000. What do you guys think about that? Any reactions? Right. not the reality of most people at all. Tell you, when I saw that number, I was like, as an employer, I was like, oh gosh, like how are we contributing to good people perhaps struggling, right? We think about our educators, how important educators are. How are we fitting in there? Our school-based mental health professionals, God love you all. How are we fitting into there? Okay, so this is a good number just to look at. All right, child poverty rates in Cumberland. So again, child poverty is looking at the federal poverty level, not the standard of need. So in Cumberland, through from 2018 to 2022, 6.6% of all kids in Cumberland were living at the federal poverty level or below. That is significantly less than the 4 core cities. Now, what we call the 4 core cities are the cities that have the highest percentage of children living in poverty in the state. So that is Central Falls, Pawtucket, Providence, and Woonsocket. Okay, so those core cities were at about 27%, so Cumberland significantly lower, and also lower than the whole state, which is 14%. But if we look at the qualifying for free and reduced price lunch, so these are the kids who are above the federal poverty level. I think it's like 180%, right, of federal poverty level, so it's a slightly higher amount. Then it's 19% of our kids in Cumberland qualify for free or reduced price lunch. Still lower than the 69% in the 4 core cities and lower than the state at 44%, but still important to know that 19% of kids are qualifying for reduced price or free lunch. Okay, so if we look at the racial and ethnic disparities in child poverty, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, question. Correct, yes, I agree with you, yes. So the statement was because parents have to fill out the form to apply for a free or reduced price lunch. So some families might not be filling it out, so this number could be higher. Also during COVID, right, families didn't have to fill out those forms because we provided free meals for all kids. And then when that changed, families had to get back into the habit of filling out those forms. I also, this is just my own speculation too, is that there are some families who may have had economic changes during the pandemic who never had to apply for free and reduced price lunch and may now qualify. Do those families know how to fill out the form? Do they know it's something that's accessible to them? So those are all things to think about too. There's probably more children than what is reported here. So if we're looking at the disparities we see here, you'll see there are large disparities by race, ethnicity throughout the state. So 53% of all Native American children in the state of Rhode Island are living in poverty. 38% of Hispanic students, 22% of Black students, 11% of Asian students, compared to 8% of white students. So we see this large disparity here in which kids are more likely to live in poverty. I know a lot of folks are educators here. Why does poverty, how does that impact education outcomes? Okay, this is an obvious answer. I'm trying to get you guys to talk. How do you think? Why should we care about child poverty rates? Right. It's hard to focus in class, right? Living in poverty, especially at a young age or for an extended period of time, creates a lot of negative outcomes for kids later in life. There's stress related to that. There's family stress. There's hunger. There's housing insecurity, not knowing where you're going to lay your head at night, right? All of these things impact how a child shows up in school, or even if they show up at school. Yes, Absolutely, and we're going to get more into that too when we look at our child well-being indicators. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. Absolutely. If parents are working multiple jobs, who's there to help them with homework, opportunity to participate in out-of-school time or after-school activities, right? The accessibility of affordable after-school care is a challenge for many families, and this all impacts kids' ability to be able to engage in the way that is expected of them after school with homework and studying and so forth. Yeah. Okay, housing. We all know we're in a housing crisis, right? Housing is ridiculously expensive throughout the state and throughout the country. Rhode Island is not an exception. And we have a affordable housing shortage. So looking at Cumberland, so the average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Rhode Island, in Cumberland in particular, is just under $2,500 a month, which is higher than the state average of $2,100 a month. Okay. So in order to be able to afford rent in Cumberland without a housing burden, which means it's calculated at 30%. So they say 30% of your income shouldn't be more than 30% for housing. So for that to be able to live in Cumberland and to rent, you would have to earn $48 an hour and work 40 hours a week and take no vacation or sick days. Okay. That's 4 times the minimum wage. It's very expensive to live in Cumberland. Okay. There are also more children experiencing homelessness throughout our state. So in 2023, there were 363 families in Rhode Island that had 668 children with them who stayed in either homeless shelters, domestic violence shelters, or some type of traditional housing or a hotel that's paid for by DCYF. Our public schools also identify children that are experiencing homelessness. And throughout the state, there were just over 1,700 children who were considered homeless. So homeless, in this case, also includes families that are living with other families. So doubling up, so not having their own home, a child not having their own bed or their own room, living in hotels, being in a shelter, and only 2% of kids, which is 2% too many, were completely unsheltered. Cumberland Public Schools in 2023 identified 23 children in our community who were homeless. Does that surprise anybody? That number's so high, 23. Yeah. Okay. Families receiving cash assistance. So I just love the cash assistance program. I don't know why I'm such a guru for Rhode Island works, but that is our state's cash assistance program. So the program is designed to help families who are living in deep poverty and provides them with cash assistance each month, as well as connects them with different services like SNAP and health insurance and subsidized childcare. We have seen, this is a state level chart right here. In 1997, we had just under 19,000 children who were receiving some type of support through the cash assistance program, and that number has decreased to only 3,100 kids. If you look at the child poverty rates from before, you'll see there are way more than 3,000 kids in our state living in poverty. However, only 3,000 are getting this kind of assistance. So some of the work that we do at Rhode Island Kids Count is we analyze this data and we try to figure out how do we get this program to more families who are living in poverty, because we know their ability to get cash will help to alleviate some of those stressors that we know children in poverty are going into school with every day. So if we're looking at our cash assistance programs, there are families receiving cash assistance in almost every single city and town in Rhode Island, with Block Island being the only exception. So you know what this cash benefit amount is. The maximum benefit for a family of 4 every month is $990. This is less than 50% of the federal poverty level. So no one's getting rich on cash assistance at all. It's a small amount, but it's an amount that can try to help some families. And in Cumberland, there were 36 families who were receiving cash assistance. They had 64 children. What's important to know is our cash assistance program, it is a children's program. So 74% of all the people in our state who are receiving cash assistance, they're actually children. And this is a program that's only eligible for families with children, because we know children should not live in deep poverty. Any questions on this? Yeah, that's me. Oh, fine. Please, thank you, Rosemary. And feel free to get up, get water if you need to. Don't worry about that. Please do so. They were here, and then we'll do the mayor. Yeah. That's a great question. So the question was, does this really get kids out of deep poverty? So the cash itself does not. However, part of the program is that parents are able to get workforce supports, so they're able to engage in workforce development programs, English language classes as well, and they're also able to get access to mental health supports. Those things, those supports is what's helping families with their long-term trajectory. And the cash benefit is really helping just to take some of that ease off so that the families are able to engage in those workforce supports. Now, I would love to see the cash benefit amount increase to a level where, like, this level is still very stressful. It's helpful, but it's still very stressful for many families. I believe if we increase that benefit just a bit more and removed there's many hoops and barriers that families have to go through to be able to get this benefit and to keep the benefit. So many hoops that sometimes it actually distracts from being able to get employment. I think if we fine-tuned those things, then our cash assistance program actually could be getting people out of deep poverty. Yeah, great question. Here. Good question. Yes. So in 1997 at the federal level, so the cash assistance program is based on a federal grant, federal block grant. And in 1997, the federal government changed the federal program where they put more restrictions on it. So we started to see a decline there. And then in 2006, the recession hit. And when the recession hit, the state, which controls how we do the federal program, put in many, many, many more restrictions than the federal government requires as a cost-saving measure. So since then, since 2006, you'll see the decline continues on. So at Rhode Island Kids Count, we are doing advocacy work to get some of those restrictions removed. And we've actually been quite successful, especially in the last 4 years, so that it's a program that is actually helpful to families instead of being punitive, which is what it became. So also during that time, in 2006, we also removed lawful permanent residents, so green card holders used to be eligible for the program, and we kicked them out of the program in 2006 as a cost-saving measure. So right now, a child in an immigrant family, even if they're a green card holder, I mean they're a lawful permanent resident and they have committed to stay in the country and they're waiting their 5 years before that becomes permanent, those children in poverty must wait 5 years before they become eligible for the program. And those parents have to wait 5 years before they're eligible for the workforce supports that come with being in the program. That is a great question. I'll be sure to give you the speakers of the House's phone number. That's a great question to ask him. It is political, and it is cost saving. So also another component of this is Rhode Island doesn't contribute any money into this program. So all of this money comes from the federal government. Now in other states, they take the federal dollars and they take their own state dollars together. so they're able to do more with it. But for the last 13 years, our state has not put any money into the program. And the federal dollars that have been there, they're using for a lot of other things as well. So they are stretching this dollar out so far, and we see the lower numbers. Yeah, I think there was a question here and a question here. Did you? Great question. So yeah, so the dollars are going places that do help children. The initial intent for this federal dollar, which is called the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, the original intent was to help children in deep poverty. But the federal law is very loose, so you can use it for a lot of different things. So our state uses about 20% of those dollars as well for child care assistance and subsidies, which we do also need. But the requirements for that are not just families living in deep poverty. So there are other populations that are struggling as well that are also benefiting from those federal dollars. What we say is that the state needs to chip in, because we need child care and we need cash assistance. If the state chipped in some dollars, we can actually do both. So, but it's not being misused. I don't want to represent it like that. It's just not going necessarily to the original intention of the federal grant. Yeah. Oh, it was a good question then. Great. Okay. So children receiving SNAP benefits, that's a supplemental nutrition and assistance program. So that's like food stamps, what people mostly know it as. So here we see in 2023 in the state, there were just over 46,000 children who were benefiting from SNAP, and 100,800 adults benefiting. It's important to know that also with this program, of course, there are low-income children that benefit from this, as well as our senior population also benefit from the SNAP program. So we're looking at children. In Cumberland, 646 children benefited from food assistance or the SNAP program. Okay, moving into health. I know all of our data is like usually so depressing, but this is something that is usually pretty good. Our children with health insurance coverage, although we are losing some ground as a state. So Rhode Island for a very long time was one of the states that had the highest percentage of our children with health insurance coverage. The only state that was better than us was Massachusetts. Okay, but we were neck and neck with them. Last year, only 2% of our kids didn't have health insurance, which is really phenomenal. A couple of years ago, we also passed legislation called Cover All Kids, which made all income eligible children, regardless of their immigration status, were able to get health insurance. And we know that is important because children who have health insurance are more likely to get the preventative care that they need, more likely to get the immunizations that they need. We have kids coming into school then that are healthier, right? However, our numbers have dropped a tiny bit, and other states are also doing better than us in some areas. So the most recent data showed that 3.25% of our kids under the age of 19 were uninsured, and we're now ranked 10th best in the country. Not second, 10th best. There could be many reasons why that is. One of it may be that some states are passing what's called continuous coverage for Medicaid eligibility, which means that right now when families apply for Medicaid, or for right care is what it's called in our state, their income is checked and can be periodically checked every quarter or so. And families, especially low-income families, are often working in a gig economy. So you may have a job and then you may work a few extra shifts, or you may be an Uber driver and you get a few extra rides that then bump you out of eligibility. And it's just a temporary, because the next month your hours may change. And depending on when that income data is pulled, it could look like someone's no longer eligible. So then families are unenrolled off of right care, and they have to apply to get back in. So some states have said enough of that. That is too much work. It's not good for kids. You don't have to reapply until you are over age 5, until you're going into kindergarten. And that has helped some states keep their kids covered. We have not yet passed continuous Medicaid eligibility. We hope that's something that the state will take up this year. Anyone want to add anything? I thought you were going to say something, Rosemary. No. Okay. She's our health expert as well. Okay, so we actually released a publication about the Medicaid redetermination. If you want to scan the QR code, you'd be able, and I think the presentation itself, there's a QR code where you can see this closer up. That just has more data around during the pandemic, kids were kept on Medicaid, and then we started this unwinding process where families had, families were able to stay on Medicaid, some had to re-enroll, and from that, we lost some kids in coverage as well. So we released a report that has some of that data, so if you want to dig in more, you can scan the QR code or just go to our website and you can pull up that publication. Okay, children's mental health. I could talk all day about this, and I'm sure there's many folks in the room that can as well. Rhode Island, as well as the rest of the nation, is currently in a children's mental health crisis. I'm sure many of you have heard about this. We had significant needs for our kids' mental health before the pandemic, and the pandemic just exacerbated that. In April of 2022, Rhode Island declared its own state of emergency for children and adolescents' mental health. And we saw in the 2023 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which is a survey that the Department of Health does in all the schools, we saw some really alarming numbers from that report. So 36% of all Rhode Island high school students reported feeling sad or hopeless for more than 2 weeks in the previous year. And 9% of our high school kids attempted suicide 1 time or more during the past year. And in 2022, more than half of Rhode Island kids between the ages of 3 and 17 who needed mental health treatment or counseling had a problem accessing that care. Have you all seen this in your classrooms or at home or in your schools? Right? Increased need, increased stress, increased anxiety, right? So our kids definitely need more help and support. Our school social workers, our school psychologists, our school counselors, thank you so much for your work. We know that our kids need you, and we also know there's not enough of you, right? So according to national experts, it is recommended that there is 1 school social worker for every 250 kids. Okay? We are not anywhere near that number. Do you guys know what your workload, your caseload is in your schools? Is it more than 250? Significantly more? Right? Significantly more. And that's not just Cumberland, right? That's the whole state as well. We need more help and support. Our community providers have been trying to step up and to help be a service, referrals to our young people as well. They are also backed up. We also have a shortage of mental health professionals. And just last week, the Department of Education announced a partnership with Hazel Health, which is coming in to also help to provide telehealth services for all public school kids in the state. It's not a permanent solution, but it sure is another piece of the puzzle that we could try to do to alleviate some of the immediate needs that our kids and our families face. Yes. And one thing about Hazel Health too is they do have multilingual staff. I believe it's like speak like 100 different languages. I forget how many different languages. Good number. And also a large percent of their staff also identify as people of color, which is really helpful because kids, we hear time and time again. Actually, we just released an issue brief, a report 2 weeks ago where we did focus groups with students of color and LGBTQ plus youth about their mental health needs and challenges. As we know, all kids are going through, most kids, all populations experience mental health challenges, but these two populations in particular experience increased stressors, and oftentimes it's the intersection of those identities that increases the stress level and trauma experiences for these kids. And in the focus groups, we heard from all the kids that they really wanted to connect to someone who they think shares some of their life experiences. So having a diverse group of mental health professionals is really important, and so we were happy to hear that Hazel Health does have some really diverse staff that could be accessible. In child psychiatry, yes, great. So if folks want to see this report, it is also available for free online. And there are some really powerful quotes that we pulled out from the focus groups that may be of interest to you. Okay. So a snapshot of SurveyWorks, which I'm sure you all know is the school climate survey. I'm sure you all take it every April and March, right? Every spring. It's really helpful to hear both students and family input. So the Cumberland data here. So this, the way it's reported is a little confusing because it says respond favorably and it sounds like it's good. So I'm going to read it to you the way that most of our minds would think of this. So during the past 12 months, about 25% of kids in Cumberland reported feeling so sad or hopeless in the 2 weeks. So how many kids reported that stress interfered with their ability to participate in school? We see that 53% of kids responded that in that way. Okay, how likely is it that someone from your school will bully you online? We're seeing that 46% of kids in Cumberland thought that. And if you walked into your class upset, how concerned will your teachers be? Only 33% were favorable to that. Okay. Any questions or thoughts there? Responses? Okay. I'm sorry, go ahead. Feeling so sad or hopeless, the upset part. Yeah, so that question is worded just like that. Have you ever felt so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more in a row that you stopped doing your usual activities? That one? Oh, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's worded just like that, but it's a good question to be asking. So are there things that, yes, do kids have the emotional vocabulary to be able to share how they're feeling? Do they feel like the environment is safe enough to be able to share how they're feeling? Do they know that the teachers in front of them, are there opportunities, I should say, for teachers to ask kids how they're feeling? Those are all, I think, things that we can think about that are maybe wrapped up in that question as well. Mm-hmm, sure. Go ahead, Liz. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Liz. Okay. Any other thoughts, questions, responses? Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, and it would be interesting also to compare those numbers and to think about what's different in different environments for kids. Because I've always been a firm believer that out of school time and after school brings out something different for children, right? It's a different kind of, different environment. And I think there's something that our schools can learn from what's happening in out of school time to see what are elements that can be brought into school so that kids have feelings that they are welcomed in their different environments, that they can be themselves, all those good stuff that they're feeling when they are doing arts or when they're doing sports programs. How do we extend that into the school year as well? And also you mentioned, Liz, also the importance of being able to do referrals and also to having that strong communication and relationship between schools and teachers and our out-of-school time providers. Because, Liz, if you know a kid is feeling sad and hopeless, how does the teacher get to know that, right? How are we talking to each other to make sure that there is all the community is wrapped around our kids, right? And that we can all support each other in supporting our kids. Yeah. Absolutely. Data sharing is important. Hard to do, but really important. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move into safety a bit. So child neglect and abuse, we report this data as well. So it's per 1,000 children. So in 2019, we're looking at Cumberland, 10.6 kids out of 1,000 kids were considered victims of child abuse and neglect, and that has gone down. So in 2023 in Cumberland, it was 3.4 kids for every 1,000 children, which is significantly lower than the state, which is 11. What's important to know about what's considered neglect and abuse, it's mostly neglect that is most of these cases, and neglect can be many different things, but oftentimes it's a lack of supervision for kids. Why DCYF may get a call. Okay, so again, thinking about like out of school time, after school, the high cost of childcare, what are families' options to make sure their kids are in a safe environment while they may be working? Okay. In Cumberland in 2023, there were 26 victims of child neglect and abuse. Okay. So this is what I was talking about. Before, it's mostly a lack of supervision for our child neglect and abuse cases. And also, if you look at the ages, it's mostly ages 6 to 11, right? Our school-aged younger children. All right, children witnessing domestic violence is also something that we look at. So these numbers are kind of steady throughout the year. During 2022, there were 105 domestic violence incidents in Cumberland. In 28 of those, there were children present. So if we think about also what are kids coming into school with, right? What have they experienced? And then we've had some tragic stories in Cumberland of that recently. So as a community, how do we pull together to help these kids, right? Okay, education. All right, so opportunities for high quality early childhood education. Early childhood education is extremely important. A child's brain grows rapidly between birth, right, through age 3. It's the fastest it's going to grow ever in our lifetimes. So what opportunities those kids have during those early years is so important. And I'm sure the school district can tell you when you go into kindergarten, right? Most kindergarten teachers can tell you, they can tell from day one which child has had a high quality early learning experience before they get to them, right? Kids learned so much in those experiences. So we track data on kids age 3 and 4 that are enrolled in Head Start and the Rhode Island pre-K system. Head Start focuses on low-income children, and Rhode Island pre-K has crossed both low-income children and higher-income children. Only 1% of kids in Cumberland engaged in some type of Head Start program. We know there's not Rhode Island pre-K here in Cumberland, but Cumberland residents can participate in Head Start, which is a children's friend in Providence. So 1% of our kids did that, and 5% of low-income kids in Cumberland were a part of Head Start. Cumberland has 6 licensed child care centers and preschools. 4 participate in the Bright Stars program, so that's the state's quality rating and improvement system. That's like a 5-star rating system, very similar to what we do for K through 12 schools. So that's a way to see what quality of our early childhood programs are. 2 of those 4 programs are considered a high quality rating, which means they have 4 or 5 stars. Go ahead, say it out loud. Yes. Congratulations. That's awesome. Yeah. If a preschool, but not Rhode Island pre-K. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I know it's confusing. Like there's so many names in the title. So there is a preschool, but it's not considered the Rhode Island pre-K state program. Yeah. Thanks for clarifying. Yeah. Great question, right? Because you can say that here in Cumberland, only 5% of low-income children are in Head Start. There's way more that are eligible. Great question. So I think sometimes there is, parents need more information about Head Start programs. That would be really helpful to share with them. But we also are in workforce shortage as well in our early childhood programs. So there were Head Start programs that had to close or to close classrooms because there weren't enough early childhood educators to lead those classrooms. So that is also a challenge. So there's less seats available, so it's harder for families to get in. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, that's an interesting model. Yeah, thank you. Did I see another hand raised up here? Yeah. Go ahead. Do you want to add, please? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm hearing maybe a possible thing for Cumberland to think about or to work on is how to increase the number of low-income kids in the city who are engaged in Head Start. And we're hearing, Boys and Girls Club, refers families, right? Families go there because they trust and they know, and their kids feel great there, and they also have access and information about different programs. What are some other spaces in the city where that happens, right? Who else has that kind of information that can share it with families? Right? So that's just something to think about. Yeah. That's great. Yeah, it's great. So look at all this collaboration. I love it. This is what we're doing. That's awesome. Great. So yes, anyone wants more information, wants to connect, here's some connections hopefully that can be made after this presentation. Okay, our multilingual learners. So we have a growing number of multilingual learners in our state, and it is such an awesome, wonderful thing. If you think about it, in the world, most people are multilingual, right? And for some reason, I know the reason, but I won't get into it. But in the United States, right, we're like, don't encourage multilingualism. Until you get older and you're a Rhodes Scholar and then you learn 11 languages, then it's really cool. But if you're an immigrant child who comes to our country and speaks Spanish, then for some reason, it's not seen the same way. But in all reality, multilingualism is and it is a wonderful thing. People who are multilingual are more likely to have economic opportunities worldwide. It also is really great for executive functioning. So multilingual folks are less likely to have Alzheimer's as adults. Isn't that interesting? And have increased executive functioning skills. Very cool. I'm still mad at my parents for not making sure I spoke different languages, right? So it's a good thing. So we had in our state a real booming population of multilingual learners. We're actually the fastest growing population of multilingual learners in Rhode Island than anywhere else in the country. So if we're looking at our public school enrollment in 2019, 3%, I'm sorry, that's Cumberland. In 2019 in the state, 10% of all of our students are multilingual learners, and that has increased to 13%. Some districts like Newport went from 3% to like 19% in just a couple of years. It's really booming in some cities where they're trying to figure out how do we better serve multilingual learners. And Cumberland has a smaller growth from 3% before the pandemic to now 5%, but it's still a growing population. Yes, please. Awesome. So it should be 6% now. Okay, thank you for that update. That's great. Thank you. And can you tell us a little bit about what are some of the services and how you're reaching out and helping our multilingual students? Thank you. Thank you. So also for multilingual, so we do a lot of advocacy with the Coalition for a Multilingual Rhode Island, if anyone is interested in getting involved with the coalition. And the work that they are doing is trying to make Rhode Island a multilingual state and ensuring that all kids have access to different languages, especially languages of their culture. So we've heard from many stories from folks in General Assembly of like, wow, my grandparents spoke Portuguese, but I was never taught Portuguese, and how I wish I still was connected to that home language. So this is multilingual is for all kids, right? And it particularly helps, yes, our very diverse kids that come to us from different countries, different backgrounds, but also for our kids who maybe are in English-only homes right now, for their exposure to different languages, especially through programs called dual language programs, where programs are taught in both English and another language. It helps both populations of kids learn different languages. And also what's interesting to know also for multilingual learners, if multilingual learners are in an effective ESL classroom, they will actually outperform English-only speaking students on our state RICAS after they exit the ESL program. Multilingual students who are in a dual language program, where they are still learning their home language and fine-tuning their home language, will actually learn English faster, which is really interesting. So the work that we are doing also is we're pushing back on that English-only narrative and saying, actually, home language is a great thing. It helps students learn English better, and it also allows them to continue to progress in content knowledge in both English language and a home language. So, all right, I know we're going short in time, so I want to make sure we get to RICAS scores, everyone's favorite topic, right? So third grade reading RICAS scores just came out last week, and we see a dip in Cumberland. So I came here wanting to ask you guys, what is going on here? What do you think? So Cumberland has done really excellent work over the last decade in doing high quality curriculum, having lots of time for teacher planning and development, and we saw Cumberland over the last decade really improve in state testing outcomes. So I was really surprised to see the 2024 results, which showed third grade reading dipping from 60% proficiency to 48. Can we talk about that? I'm curious. What do we think that's attributed to? It's just a guess. I don't want to speculate it by reading. I'm actually here in Cumberland. I want to know what you guys think. I'm sure you guys are talking about it a lot, too. I'm sure you're analyzing your own data. Or you think it's the lag from COVID that we're now seeing the real results here? Any other thoughts? Yeah. Interesting. Thank you. Thank you. Any other thoughts or questions, reflections? Thanks for putting yourself out there, though. I appreciate it. But that's interesting what you're saying about common planning time. I mean, evidence shows that teachers having time to plan leads to big results for kids. So, yeah, thanks. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Thank you. Did I see another hand raised? No? Okay, well, I'm sure you guys are going to dig into the data. I can't wait to get my kids' data soon. I'd say I love getting, this is a kudos to Ride also, I love getting I mean, of course, I'm a data nerd, but I love getting the results with the QR code on it, with the video that shows families how to read and understand the results. I think it's really helpful. And I hope that, I know when I went to parent-teacher conferences for my daughter last year, they had her RICAST scores out, and we talked about it as a frame of our reference and the basis of our parent-teacher conferences. So, so kudos to the teachers who are doing that. I think that's a really helpful practice and gets families really better understanding and not being, I always try to tell my daughter, don't be afraid of the RICAST test. Like, this is really helpful information so your teachers know what you need to work on. So kudos to you all who are doing that. And I'm just curious to see where this goes, but Cumberland has done such extraordinary work. I hope this is just a hiccup here. Okay. Any other comments there? Okay. So large disparities, and we're looking at third grade reading outcomes if we look at race, ethnicity, and disability status. So students with disabilities, over only 10%, only 1 in 10 of our kids with disabilities are meeting proficiency levels for reading. 20% of our multilingual learners, only 24% of our low-income kids. And if we look at our students of color, 23% of Hispanic kids, 25% of Black students. But 10% for our students with disabilities. Right. And we know that kids are not reading at grade level by third grade. It has a whole bunch of negative outcomes for them later in their academic career. Right? So that's definitely some work that needs to be done. Any questions or comments here? Okay. So this year was the first year that we started reporting data on science skills, which we're really excited about. And arts was also a new indicator in our fact book this year. So Cumberland does really well with science. If you guys look at this, so in Cumberland, 53% of fifth graders, 49% of eighth graders, and 43% of 11th graders met expectations for the science skills, which is significantly higher than the rest of the state. There are, we still have to look at the disparities that exist by different subgroups, but overall, as a state, as a city, you're doing much better than the state. But again, calling out attention for our students receiving special education services, only between 7% for the little ones and 6% for our older students. So more work is needed there. And there is also data for students experiencing homelessness in this area, where only 9% of our fifth graders and 7% of eighth graders experiencing homelessness had the same science outcomes. The arts also, we see in general low-income areas tend to have less exposure to the arts for their students. Cumberland actually is doing really well with arts exposure, better than the rest of the state, where 90% of kids have some form of exposure to arts education. So yay, great job. We have creative kids in Cumberland. All right, chronic absence. Chronic absence is a statewide issue. We know this. And it's challenging in the early grades and also in the high school age. I think I have a slide here that has just Cumberland's numbers here that could be helpful. So in Cumberland, 1 in 4 high school students miss 18 or more days of school. 1 in 4. It's lower than the rest of the state, but still higher than any of us want. I know we have only a few minutes left, but I'd love to just open this up to discussion. What are some things that schools are doing, especially at the high school level, around chronic absence and reducing that rate? Anything? Any suggestions of what the town can do more? Great. Great, great, good, thank you. Oh, I want to meet Clipper. What kind of pup? Oh, so we in our office we love dogs and pets, and we actually, Coventry also has a dog who works with their health and wellness team, and so we've tweeted about their pup. So we have to get Clipper on social media, Katie, as well. So that's awesome. Oh, that's lovely. Great. Any other idea? Are there any partnerships or discussions that's happening? Because we talked about out of school time as well. I know Boys and Girls Club and OCYL does a lot of work. Is there any communication between agencies? Because I know from when I was a teacher, so I used to teach in Providence, sometimes kids would show up to the after school program, but they don't show up at school. Is there communication that's accessible? Great, thank you. And I saw a hand in the back. Power School. Great, thank you. So those. Okay, this is great. Sharing tools, love it. I know we are at 5:02, so I don't want to keep you all extra late, but I think everyone should have access to the rest of the slides. There's just a few slides we didn't get to, but this one I definitely want to make sure everyone sees. The school suspension rates. In Cumberland, Cumberland had more in-school suspensions than most other districts in the state. So there was 845 suspensions, 272 of them being out-of-school suspensions. So I'll tell you, when I looked at that, I was also surprised by that number. So that may be something that you want to dig into. We track suspensions because students that experience harsh disciplinary practices or out of school suspensions have worser outcomes, both in school, attendance, no question about that, decreased graduation rates, decreased college going rates, and more likely to be involved in the juvenile justice system or the adult system as they get older. So we pay really close attention to suspension rates and also the question of how are kids learning if they're not in class. So that's just something to take a look at. That's all grades. All grades, yes. That's all grades. Absolutely, absolutely. Great, so, yeah. Mm. Sure. Well, you're right, that could be. And we have heard of some districts where there's like suspension loopholes where parents are called to come get your kid, but they're not counting it as an out-of-school suspension, even though in essence that is an out-of-school suspension. So you're right, things like that do happen in different districts, and how people what are they counting as a suspension or not a suspension. But overall, the research shows that restorative justice practices are actually most effective for kids. So if there is a disciplinary behavioral issue happening, how can that be addressed in a restorative way where kids are not given what's considered where they're removed from the classroom, removed from their peers, or removed from the learning experience? There are other ways of addressing misbehavior. Jamestown, actually, I'll call them out as a school district that's been doing some really amazing work around restorative justice practices, where they do not allow out-of-school suspensions at all in that district. And they have trauma-informed trainings and also do restorative justice practice as part of their school policy and their procedure. So that could be an interesting school district to take a look at to see how they're doing that. Let's see. School meals, I know we have to go. So there's data on here around school meals, which we talked a bit about earlier in our presentation. And then the high school graduation rate. Cumberland overall has a higher high school graduation rate, 89%, compared to the rest of the state. And we can look also at aggregating that data. To no surprise, there are some populations that are not graduating within that 4 years like their peers. So our students with disabilities have the lowest 4-year graduation rate of all of our student subgroups here in Cumberland. Okay. And we have some college access data here that you can take a look at if you go with the QR code in your slides. And that's it. So thank you so much for your engagement. Thank you for the great discussion. Please keep the discussion going. Please keep talking about this, bringing your great minds together, all in support of Cumberland kids. So thank you.